Welcome to the Sundays with Wendy podcast, Peter Samuelson. It is an honor to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. And back at you. I was reading up on the life of Wendy, and what came to my mind is if they give you lemons, make lemonade. And you've done so much through your foundation to lift up other families with a seriously ill child. And I love your holistic approach. It resonates, with several of my 7 charities and actually with some of my film work as well. Life is lifted by helping other people, and you're a shining example. So thank you.
No, thank you so much. That means so coming from you. And you, oh my gosh, you have 7 charities? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm the founder of 7. 2 of them merged, so that there's 6 that still exist. And I functionally run, or I'm part of the team running 4 of them. The others are in great hands, but not mine. But I'm a starter-upper more than anything else. It's what we learn as a film producer, and it turns out the same toolkit of getting a film made. Is this story compelling? How will I tell it? Where will the money come from? Who will write this story? Who will direct it? Who will be in the film? It's the same toolkit taken laterally over to this is ridiculous. In America, 6% of foster kids go to college. That's absurd. Why is that? It's a tiny fraction of, the rest of the country, but these are kids with no functional family. They need to go to college more than anybody else. So out of that little idea, I founded firststar.org, or Starlight was even simpler. My cousin introduced me to a seriously ill 10-year-old little boy who was in hospital in the UK. And when my cousin asked him, what would make you happy, Sean? Sean said, oh, that's easy. I want to go to Disneyland. And we did it. We flew him and his mum, Brenda, and they and the cousin moved into my apartment. It was back in my single days. And we did everything you probably shouldn't do with a dying child. And he had a fine old time. And when he went home and indeed did pass away, we realized what we had expected, which was that it would have been a wonderful set of experiences for him. That was certainly true. But his mum was left with happy memories and not just her kid with a tube up his nose in a hospital bed. And we felt we had been given a great gift. And so the starter-upper in me stood at the end of a boardroom table after work one day. And I said, we just did this. I wonder if we could do it half a dozen times a year. Why wouldn't we start there? And the lawyer said, what do you want to call it? And I had invited, when I was casting, producer word, casting the room, I realized, what do I need? I need a lawyer. I need an accountant. I need a publicist. I need someone who understands the politics of hospitals. I need organizing people. I need fundraisers. So I had kind of cast the room. And when the lawyer said, what do you want to call it? I said, oh, I didn't give that any thought at all. What do we want to call it, guys? And the young lady with whom I had had one date, and I had invited her because she said she was an accountant, and I'd phoned her up and said, remember me, I'm so sorry, I've been out of town, I should have called you, my bad, but could you please come to a meeting because I need an accountant for this new charity idea that I've had? And she showed up, and when the lawyer asked, what do we call it, she said, you know that children's rhyme, Starlight, Star Bright, first star I see tonight, I wish I may, I wish I might, have this wish I wish tonight. Why don't we call it, she asked, the Starlight Children's Foundation? And we all said, oh, that's great. And I had a graphic designer there because I knew we'd need a logo. And the graphic designer said, oh, I can see it in my head. It's a child reaching for a star. And so that has been, for the last 41 years, the logo of starlight.org, my first and biggest charity. But, I've gone on. Steven Spielberg and I did Starbright World, which was the world's very first avatar-based navigable social network, long before Second Life and MySpace and long, long before Facebook. I actually looked up when Steven and General Schwarzkopf and I pressed the button at Digital World to turn on Starbright World, our one. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook was 11 years old.
Oh
So
my gosh.
there you go. We were there first. On the other hand, you can look at it the other way around, which is he was smart and he did it for profit. We did ours as a labor of love. We did it as a charity. So the success is great, but it's definitely not financial.
No, 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 it isn't. But I just love that you have taken all of your experience and your heart and put it into this meaningful work. And I'm just going to back up for a minute. I'm not going to read your bio because it would take up the whole podcast. But you are a producer, educator, entrepreneur, media executive, and philanthropist. And that is a lot. That is a wonderful life.
Well, it's several lives, you know. I
Mhm.
just live them in peril. I've been blessed with the fact of sleeping very little since I was little. Seems to have no effect on me if I only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. So, for example, the book, Finding Happy, I realized if I don't discipline myself, I will never get this done. So I started getting up at 4:30 every morning and writing for an hour from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. And I initially I wrote two books. I wrote a kind of self-help Bible for young adults, let's say 15 to 30 years old. And in parallel, on the odd numbered days, I was writing what amounted to an autobiography. But then I realized I can use anecdotes from my checkered life as a film producer. Something's very funny, some really scary. I can use those mini stories to punch up the self help chapters in Finding Happy. So, for example, there's a chapter where the chapter heading is, what is a good risk? What is a bad risk? How can you tell the difference? And I realized I can illustrate that all four ways. Risks I didn't take, I should have taken. Risks I did take, where I nearly killed myself. Good risks I took, and it worked out fine. Risks I took, it didn't work out fine, and on and on. And I realized I can do that with every chapter. And what I've done at the end of every chapter is I've put points for reflection, things to think about, and I wouldn't call them homework assignments, but just things that a young mind might be bothered by, and they might have been sparked by the chapter into some new solutions or some new pathways into solutions. So it's everything. It's all the self-esteem stuff. If you don't expect more from yourself, how would you ever perform? But it's also, what should you do if you're depressed? What should you do if you're being bullied? How high can you aim? What if you aimed high but failed? How can you find love? What if you have a teacher who doesn't like you? How can you make a teacher give you better grades? What's the best way to do homework? On the bus on the way to school on the last possible day? Or actually as soon as it's given to you, so you don't have to think about it again for a week? So I've gone through it, and it's based on hundreds of mentorships that I've done over the years, because I kind of have pattern recognition, as producers get, where, every film you make is in a different place with a different crew and a different script and different cast. But you say, oh, one of these problems. All right, I've had this problem before. It was different. On that one, I was in the Philippines, and now I'm in Morocco. But it's the same toolkit to fix this, to do it, to make it happen. And I realized I have pattern recognition from so many mentorships, and I've made each topic, how do you find love? What is the meaning of your life? And there's actually 3 chapters about the meaning of life. Part 1, part 2, and part
Mhm.
3. I won't give that away, but I do believe in my own life and in helping young people. I have worked out how to find happy, and it seemed, boorish not to share that. You could call the book What I Know Now, which I wish I knew when I was 18. You could have knocked me over with a feather because I finished writing it and I thought I'd have to self-publish it, on Amazon or something. And someone introduced me to a rather good book agent. Next thing I know, there's a little bidding war going on, and Simon and Schuster Regalo got it. The funniest thing that's just happened is that Simon and Schuster have been placing it with retailers. It's in all the onlines, audiobook and the Kindle and the paper book. but it's also in stores, Barnes and Noble and all that kind of thing. The latest one, my family thought was just hilarious because it's going into Target. And when I told the family that, one of my children said, "It's going into Target. Where do you think they'll put, where they stack up the books, the display?" And I said, "I don't know, wherever they want." And he said, "Do you think maybe it'll go between the condoms and the plastic spoons?" And I said, "That is a brilliant idea because I think that is its natural location in the universe."
I mean, I love that. That is hilarious. And I haven't had a chance to read the entire book, but what I love about it, it's you even tell the reader in the beginning how to read the book. And the chapters are such that you go what you're drawn to, there's no right way or wrong way to read this. And it's in its nonlinear form, which is so beautiful and creative. We were chatting a little bit before we hit record about life is not linear.
Well, life isn't linear. One of the great gifts to me is I was first in my family to college. I had this one mentor who changed my life, Mr. Lund. He was my 10th grade English teacher in school. And I'm sure he had a first name, but we were only ever called him Mr. Lund. Or maybe his first name was Mr. I don't know. Let me see me after school, and which is never a good idea in school. But I did. And he said, now I remember he poked me in the chest like that. And he said, now listen, if you work about twice as hard, and if I tutor you, you could go to a really good university. And this was back in England. I said, like, where? And he said, I don't know, Oxford, Cambridge, Bristol, somewhere like that. And I said, no one in my family has ever been to college or university. And in fact, my dad left school at 14. And he said, oh, well, then it'll be even better, won't it? Because you'll be the first one. And I did what he said and got myself on a scholarship into Cambridge. And what I studied there was English literature. And what you learn by studying English literature is it divides. The biggest divide in English literature is before the invention of the printing press and after the invention of the printing press. Before the invention of the printing press, literature was an oral tradition where some guy, the storyteller, came into a village and he said, gather ye around, and I shall tell you a story of Sir Gawain and the Knights of the Round Table. And he then stood there and talked. That was non-linear. He'd talk a bit about Gawain, and then he'd talk a bit about King Arthur, and then a bit about Guinevere, and then he'd loop back over to Gawain, and he was not telling it on a timeline. Then Caxton invents the printing press, and all the stories have to be reconfigured to fit into a page format in a book. If you are on page 110, by definition, you are not on page 62, and you begin at the beginning and you move to the end. I have not written my book that way. I have realized, I think, I hope, and I expect that especially young adults do not think in a linear fashion. Their ideas swirl around, and it's like threads. It's like string theory in science. It's woven together in sort of several dimensions. And it's definitely not page one, page two, page three. So what I've done is I've used the table of contents to put one young person's challenge per chapter. And what I think and I hope and I expect is that grown-ups who have a young adult, 15 to 30 years old in their life, and they think perhaps they could use a little bit of help, they will buy it and give it as the maybe high school graduation present. It could even be as early as the middle school graduation. You're going into big boys school, big girls school, or it could be the transition. I think there's more stress in transition points for young adults than at most other times. That's why it's so awful for foster kids, because the stresses are they move to some new placement with new strangers, and the whole thing is just terribly stressful. But my thought is that the grown-ups will buy the book, and the kids will, sure, you want to sit down and read it from page 1 to page 350, God bless. However, if you want to dip into it because you're really worried that no one that you love will ever love you back, if you want to dip into it because you have no clue what to do, you're being bullied in school, or you're perplexed. Am I an artist or an engineer? I don't know. They want me to specialize. I'm not ready to specialize. What do I do? You're in the workplace, and here's another bully. I thought I left that behind in middle school. No, they have bullies in the workplace. So what to do about these things is organized into chapters. And I anticipate, I mean, it's going to be very interesting. The publisher thinks I'm completely bonkers because I put my email address in the book. And I've said, if I get dozens of emails, I will reply to all of them. If I get hundreds, I will read all of them and someone will reply, but it might not be me. And if I get thousands, I said, I promise I will dip in and I will read and I will apply pattern recognition and I will feed them all into AI to do a summary for me. But I'm going to have a feedback loop because in the end, mentoring is as much about listening and going where the young adult needs the help. It's a very rare young adult that doesn't know what their challenges are. They know the challenges, they just don't know the solutions. So what I've tried to do by listening to hundreds and hundreds of mentees is to develop my own pattern recognition, which is what we do as a film producer, and to come up with concrete solutions, not a lot of you should have better self-esteem, but actually, how do you get agency? How do you get better self-esteem? How do you accomplish enough that you can be proud of it? How do you work out what you're good at? How do you not be daunted where you try and fail? In Silicon Valley, they don't give venture capital to entrepreneurs without asking them, tell me about where you failed and what did you learn from it. Sure, they love it that they've had some prior success, but what they're mostly interested in, when the going gets tough, what will you do? Will you give up? We'll lose all our money? No, you won't give up. The door, what do film producers do? The door is locked, go around the back. Maybe there's a window open to the problem. Who knows? So you're resilient. And one thing I've learned from foster kids, there's nothing good about being in foster care. It means you were abused or neglected, and now you're living with strangers. And I just had lunch with a mentee who's in foster care and who's a current student. And I said, you always have a raft of food on your plate. Why are you always so hungry? And he said, well, I'm always hungry, with the foster family I live with. And I said, well, can't you just go to the fridge and get a snack? He said, no, there's a padlock on it. And I said, get out of here. Seriously? They padlock the refrigerator? I asked him, who have keys? He said, well, the family. And I said, and the family has kids your age? He says, yeah, and a little younger. They all get keys. They all go and have a snack. I never get a snack. So the injustices of being in foster care, it's as though they designed a system to suppress your self-esteem. And we try in firststar.org to give it back. We do not give the kids trash bags to pack their stuff in. We give them rollerboards, which are rather beautiful. We do not padlock the fridge. We give them agency. The best class I teach, I'm only really qualified to teach 2 classes in First Start, and I do this whenever I got time because it's a great joy. I teach videography. I know how to help young adults tell stories audiovisually. That's good. But the other one, which I love, and I invented it, is called Random Acts of Kindness and Pay It Forward. I had a wonderful conversation with a donor, Mort, in Dallas, and he said, what do you really want to add that you don't have in firststar.org now? And I said, I want us to have a class in philanthropy. And he said, what? Who are going to be the philanthropists? I said, it'll be the kids. So he said, yeah, I'll give you money for that. That sounds intriguing. So it's a 2-class little mini course, 90 minutes each one. The first one, I say, okay. So I'm sitting there with, let's say, a cohort of 30 of our students. half young men, half young women. I usually teach it in 10th grade. And I say, you're walking down the sidewalk and there is an old lady in rags, fast asleep, face down on the sidewalk. Do you A, stop, lean over, don't wake her up, and put $1 under her arm? Or B, do you wake her up and give her the $1? Or C, do you walk on by and look in the other direction? That leads to a spirited discussion about the golden rule. And the golden rule, which is one of the most important rules in life, it's in every one of 170 religions that exist in the world. And it is the sense of social justice. It is the sense that this old lady is living in a cardboard box, and on the outside it says Sub-Zero. What's wrong? What's out of kilter with this picture? She's living in a damp cardboard box. I got the refrigerator. I must do something about it. Most of us, not everyone, there are some real terrible people who are just selfish, but most people realize that for them to have their own equilibrium and to feel happy, they need to help other people. And they do. So I say, well, is it only religious? Do you do it because Jesus told you to do it? But, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And a man never stands so tall as when he stoops to hold the hand of a child in need. And they say, no, you could be an atheist. You could still have that instinct. And I say, who knows the second law of thermodynamics? And maybe 3 kids at the back of the room do. And I say, all right, tell us what it is. Oh, well, that's the one about entropy. The second law says that in any closed system, and a closed system could be the engine in your car, it could be a family, it could be your planet. In any closed system, if you don't apply energy, just leave it alone to its own devices, it will decay to random chaos. And therefore, if you think about a family, or oiling the engine in the motor in your car, or if you think about, a planet in crisis with global warming and so forth, we all have to do our bit, because if we don't, what we will inherit, and you more than me because you're younger, will be crisis in every direction. So it's not really a choice. So then in the second class, I say, thanks to Mort in Dallas, who is a very generous man, each of you is going to receive $200. And they say, seriously? We get $200? And I say, no, you don't get to keep it. You have to write a 300-word little mini essay to whom or to what you wish it to go. And we're going to actually give it. And then you're going to go back a couple of weeks later and see, did the homeless guy, did he buy the shoes, or did he buy a big bottle of Ripple? Sometimes philanthropy doesn't work as intended, and the kids love it. And I think they all grow an inch during the course of actually implementing the program. And the essays are just brilliant. My name is Jose. I'm adding $10 of my own because that makes 210. And coincidentally, down at the Humane Society, for them not to euthanize a dog is $70. So I'm saving 3 puppies. And the reason that I'm saving 3 puppies is the last time I was down there, I looked into the eyes of a puppy that had been very badly beaten. And I saw my own eyes because I was very badly beaten as well. So I'm saving 3 puppies, love Jose. Stuff like that. And it's very, very good. These kids, it's never crossed their mind that there might be someone worse off than them and that they would have agency and empowerment. It's a rough time. We well know in firststar.org, a foster kid, they are completely disempowered, which is why they don't get their rights as human beings. They don't vote. They haven't got any money. They'll never march. They don't chain themselves to the railings. They don't employ lobbyists. So why would the system ever improve? 2,200 jurisdictions across the country. A few of them do a good job. Most of them are terrible. Why don't the good ones teach the bad ones? Because the bad ones don't want to know. They have a little self-perpetuating system. And the biggest evil of the lot is that the system says if we detect there's a complaint of abuse or neglect from a neighbor or something, in go the police and a social worker and they investigate. If they validate it, they remove the child and put them with strangers, and they consider that their job is to keep them there until they turn 18. And then they say, have a nice life, Sheila. Send us a postcard. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't know any 18-year-old who really can take care of themselves and is a fully functioning adult. We do better than that. No good parents in the world consider that their job ends with crossing their child over the road so they don't get hurt. We listen to them plonking on a piano and we say, "Oh, do you enjoy doing that? Would you like to have lessons? Oh, you run really fast. We got to get you on the track team. I'm going to go in and tell them they got to put you on the track team." And we advocate for our children, and we help them, and we teach them, and we teach them life skills. Foster kids get like nothing, and they feel as though nobody loves them, and that's accurate in most cases. So we do all of those things. We house, educate, and encourage them for 4 years, the 4 years of high school, on the campuses of big universities. And then we get them into college. And you heard me say 6% of American foster kids go to college. 89% of our kids in firststar.org go on to college. I mean, it's a huge success. That's almost double the percentage of middle-class kids that middle-class families send on to college. And the ones who don't go, they have productive lives. They become firemen or police officers or engineers or something, that's a career. You can earn an awful lot of, we just had pipes worked on in our house. Plumbers get paid an awful lot of money. So even that 11% who don't go to college, they go to vocational training, and that's good too. So long as they build a happy life. I never say to the kids, because it's demoralizing, but over half of the perpetrators of abuse or neglect on children were themselves abused or neglected. You listen to one of these, dreadful people who have been arrested, and when they talk about their own background, dreadful things happen to them. So think of it this way, back to ripples on the pond. If we pivot one young adult to a productive, happy life, not all of service, let them earn a whole lot of money. I'm a big capitalist. But under their blotter, they could volunteer, they could help other people, they could find agency for others and for themselves. And I think, just to give away part of the meaning of life that's in Finding Happy, the book, I think one of the meanings of life is through service. If you don't do it, I don't think you can be happy. And you might think that sitting in bed and eating chocolate ice cream is what makes you happy. But in the end, nah, the next day, that isn't where happiness came from. And for many people, it's not their job. Their job is so they can put food on the table and pay the rent. But happy is definitely to be found, and so are people to love through involvement in a charity, a philanthropy. Whether it's edar.org, which is my single-user homeless shelter on wheels. It stands for Everyone Deserves a Roof, EDAR.org. Whether it's working with the homeless, that old lady. I really did meet an old lady. I was coming out of a restaurant, and I asked her, "Where do you sleep at night?" And she took me to the scrap land next to the freeway, and there was a big old ugly damp cardboard box with Sub-Zero written on the side, and she said, "I sleep here." And I thought, this is not right, is it? We got the fridge and she got the box. I have to do something. So I was going to build a sort of dormitory system building for 100 unhoused people. But when I got the architect and the space planner and the budgeter, turns out it's about $5 million to put a building up and kit it out and so forth. And that's for 100 people. So it's $50,000 to get one person off the street. And then I said, how many unhoused people are there just in Los Angeles? Turns out it's 100,000. So to get them off the street would be 5 billion with a B. I have no idea how you raise $5 billion. So I thought, well, let's not give up. Film producers never give up. If the door's locked, we go around the back, see if someone's left a window open to the problem. And I had this idea in my head that in the daytime, you would push this EDAR thing along, and you would do your recycling or whatever, and you put your stuff in it, and you'd have something to call your own that wasn't a stolen shopping cart. But at night, you would park it, put the two brakes on, let the front down, let the back down, and you would now have a single user homeless shelter with 2 doors, 4 windows, and the whole thing had to cost not $50,000, but substantially less than $1,000. We've got hundreds of them out on the street. We just did focus groups on a redesign, and I'm hoping we might be able to sell them at retail and to government, like FEMA and the Forestry Service and so forth, or after a hurricane, because we could then take the profits from that, because obviously we have to give them to unhoused people because they have no money to buy them. So we just gift them to them. So I don't know, I bang on, and I've tried to put into Finding Happy what I've learned and how I found my own happiness in helping other people. And it's for young adults, and it's for every adult who wants to help a young adult, mainly at a transition point in the life of the young adult where they are genuinely perplexed and in need of a bit of guidance. And it's organized in a chapter system. You can read the whole book, God bless. But if you don't want to, also you can listen to it. I just
Did you record audiobook?
Yeah, I got paid to read my own book. I decided no one else is reading my book because there's 1,000 kids in First Star at least that I've lectured to, and I've lectured in so many film schools and so forth. They know what I sound like. We can't get some imposter to read my book.
Yeah.
So I did. It's an amazing experience because I had to sit for 6 hours a day for 4 days in a booth in Burbank, California, with an engineer on the other side of the glass who every so often Paul the engineer would say, "Could you go back to the beginning of the chapter?" And we did it. And it will go up day and date, June 10, with the paperback and also the Kindle. As I said, we've just, with another donor, Bill Catuzzi, who I love very much, we've just donated enough money to First Star that we are gifting a book to every single student and alumnus in the First Star network of 12 academies. And my email address is in it. I'm looking forward to hearing back from them.
All right, so Finding Happy, a user's guide to your life with lessons from mine.
That is what it is. And you should write one, Wendy, as well.
I
Because
have. I wrote one story about Ben. It's interesting we're talking about nonlinear because it was A to B kind of, and it was very difficult for me to go back and relive that A to B. So I turned it into a series of essays, if you will. And it just feels right. And then I wrote something called The Healing Guide,
Mhm.
which I spoke over a season of the podcast, which I feel like I could go back and maybe make that a little more meaningful. But I don't know. I feel like there might be a third out there as well. But it's so inspiring to hear from someone like you, a trailblazer in this work. And I can't let you go without asking you a question that I ask all of my guests. Being in this space of philanthropy and helping all of these people, you know a great deal about healing. And so I just want to ask you, what does the word healing mean to you?
Intrinsic in healing, I think, is that it has to be holistic. One of the great revelations after I founded starlight.org all those years ago was we started noticing that the kids' physical health seemed in some cases to be affected by our process of trying to make them happy, or indeed making them happy. So things would happen like a kid would say, "I want to go to Disney World." And we'd say, "Well, your T cell count is too low. And Dr. Jones says you can't travel. So let's talk about a different wish, like, you know, the puppy dog or the computer or whatever, because we haven't do a list. That's part of the process where we do wish granting. And every so often the kid would say, "I don't want the damn computer. I want to go to Disney World with my mum and my dad and my brother and my sister." And we'd say, "Well, if your T cell count comes up, you'll go." And if it doesn't, let's talk about the computer. And on occasion, strangely, sort of almost like weirdly, their T cell count would jump upwards unexpectedly.
Mhm.
And then we would do whatever it was they wanted to be able to do that wouldn't otherwise have been possible. And then medical science caught up with us because there's this field called psychoneuroimmunology, which didn't exist when we were effectively doing it at the beginning of starlight.org. But psychoneuroimmunology, PNI, says that there is a circular relationship between the mind and the body, and a depressed person has a suppressed, lowered T cell count, which is crucially unhelpful for certain oncological and other, disease situations. And you can reverse it by making kids happy. And it's even worse than that because a kid with a suppressed immune system becomes sad. So let's not look on the negative vicious circle of it, but there is absolutely a virtuous circle where if you make a kid happier, they will thrive physically better. Not in every case, a kid with a broken leg, I don't think sending them on a trip is, going to heal their broken leg. However, for a good half of childhood, especially the cancers, the oncological stuff, make the kid happy, and it's intrinsically valuable. The other thing, I never realized at the beginning, but we absolutely do. We heal families through starlight.org. When a mum and a dad have a seriously ill child, it's probably contributing to the decay of their marriage. They probably haven't spent time with each other without talking about the kid. And then the siblings are really interesting. The younger kids, younger than the sick kid, are jealous often because the sick kid gets disproportionate amount of attention. The older kids have guilt because they think, well, why did my sister get this horrible thing and have to be in hospital? I didn't get it, and they have guilt. So suddenly in Steam Starlight with our 8 psychosocial services, and we reverse all that. We fix it up. We empower them to find happy, and that's in the book too. So the book is also for entrepreneurs because a film producer is the ultimate entrepreneur. And you're always saying, is this story big enough, important enough, viable enough that I'm willing to give it a year and a half of my life? How will I pitch it? Where will the money come from? Who is my crew? Who will direct it? Who will be the cast? Who's going to distribute it? And then you measure, is it any good? Turns out that big red Sears Roebuck toolkit that you build over the years, making lots of films, you can take it sideways into nonprofit. You can say, seriously ill kids are sad. What are we going to do about it? You can say, foster kids don't go to college. What are we going to do about it? You can say, everyone deserves a roof, but this old dear doesn't have a roof. What am I going to do about it? And you do it. And it's not only having the original idea, it's also then in those tricky early months and years, you've got to keep the thing alive and you've got to fundraise for it and you've got to get government permissions and you've got to do all the plethora of things that it's necessary to do to run anything worthwhile. So I'm up to charity number 7. But really what the book is for is any adult who wants to help a young adult that they care about very much. I just did a podcast with Teamsters all around the country. In my mind's eye, I was connected audio only because they're driving with, 18-wheeler drivers driving from A to B. And we had a fine old time because, of course, truckers are often family people as well and desperately worried about their teenage kids and the fact that they're away from home so much and what should I do? And I mean, I'm in there saying, well, a film producer is not dissimilar. Not only have I worked with more Teamsters than I've had hot cups of coffee, because you always have, 15 or 20 big trucks on a film. But in addition, I'm away from home far too much. And it's all about how can I be a long distance dad, but not do a crummy job at that? And how do I be there for my kid? It's a little bit easier because at least in the evenings they can FaceTime and do Zoom and all the rest of it these days. But yeah, I had a wonderful conversation with Teamsters about how to parent when there is an impediment, an obstacle where you are not geographically proximate. You're not right there in their face. What do you do in between when you're away? And that's something I've had to give a lot of thought to. That's in the book too.
There's so much in this book, and I know you say it's a masterclass for Gen Z and millennials, but I got a lot out of it. I mean, I was drawn to chapter 24, what is leadership, even as a 52-year-old. And you're so good. You even tell people, look up hive mind. You give them little tasks to do, which is brilliant.
Well, it's what I know now that I wish I had known when I was 18. You know, I've met the hive mind 100 times in my life, but maybe someone of 18 has no idea what it is. So, they've definitely never heard of the exogenous brain. And I didn't hear about that until I was in my 20s and I went to MIT and Nick Negroponte started talking about it. And I said, I suddenly realized what you mean by the exogenous brain. You mean the hive mind. He said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But exogenous brain sounds posher.
The chapter before that too, I also read, it's a very short chapter, and you weave all of your life experience into these titles so beautifully. But it was about Revenge of the Nerds, and in my family, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we talk about the movie, or especially around the holidays. And my mom, I love to hear her laugh, so sometimes we'll just say it and she'll start laughing and she'll talk about a scene from the movie, so I got a little laugh too.
Well, Wendy Coleman Goldberg, challenge you to do the nerd laugh. If you do it, I'll do it.
All right, you do it first. Yeah. Like that.
There you are. A first in American podcasting history, a
The
nerd laugh on National Podcast.
Oh my gosh, this is too much. I have 10 first cousins. This link to this episode is going to go out to our family cousin group chat.
I love it. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for writing this and sharing all of your wisdom with the world. And again, Finding Happy will be released on June 10th.
There it is.
I love it.
A little bit of promotion there. And I invented the cover. And what you can see on the cover is that in big and little writing, it's got everything that the book is about. Yeah?
Did you do the cover, or did you have an idea
I
about
did the concept for the cover, and then a graphic artist who's much cleverer as a graphic artist than me sort of made it prettier. But it's indeed a user's guide to your life with lessons from mine.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I just wish you so much success. Are you going on a book tour?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the book tour spans bookstores, and I'm available. Any bookstores out there want to see my face live or on Zoom? I'm available. But I'm also going and visiting, not all, but a bunch of the First Star Academies across the country because I'm going to sign books and do a Q&A. And, I'm most excited at the feedback that I hope I will get.
You will. I just can't wait. Much success, and please stay in touch. I want to learn more about all the wonderful work you're doing.
I'm happy to come back on whenever you want. We think there ought to be another wave of book movement in the fall when college and school go back into session. It's fine releasing it June 10, but the schools and the colleges are pretty empty, other than First Star students, because that's when we can get the dorm space. So it all works out, but we could do another one if you want in the fall, whenever you want.
I would love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.